Hi everyone, I hope you're very well. Today is going to be a Q&A video, my first ever Q&A video and possibly my last ever Q&A video. Thank you very much to everyone who has kindly submitted questions to me. I've had quite a lot of questions that are relatively similar and people who have asked multiple questions. So I'm going to break down all the questions, potentially paraphrase and consolidate them into one definitive list. So let's not waste any more time, let's get stuck in. I've got my questions written down here because I can't remember them all. Question 1, what is the first image or photo that got you hooked on photography? Awesome question this. I think the image that I'm just going to put up on screen right now, this was taken in 2007 at the Sala de Uyuni salt flats in Bolivia, an absolutely extraordinary place. And this image probably represents the moment where I started seeing photography as more than just taking snapshots. I would literally give everything to go back to that moment with what I know now to shoot that scene again because it was unbelievable. Question 2, do you struggle to find new locations on the Isle of Man? Yes and no. The Isle of Man is both a very easy and a very difficult place for landscape photography, I find. On one hand, there's a lot of beauty and diversity packed into a relatively small area, which makes it easy to photograph. But if you've been doing it for any long period of time, the small constrained nature of the island can feel quite limiting in terms of locations. So quite often I'll go through times where I'm absolutely sick of the place and I long and lust for the freedom of the mainland UK. And then other times I'll have so many location ideas in my head that I literally do not have enough time to shoot them. Question 3, do you feel there's a hierarchy, almost celebrity culture in the YouTube landscape photography community? Definitely. I would say there's probably around a dozen sort of landscape photography geared channels that absolutely dominate the scene, and to some extent within this particular niche they have become celebrities, I would say. And I think that YouTube is actually so important now for the promotion of photography talent that in the decades to come, in many respects, I think the most famous photographers are going to be YouTube made. Next question, are you starstruck by anyone in the landscape photography YouTube community? Difficult to say as I've never actually met any of them, but I would say from the well-established channels, probably my favourite is probably Adam Gibbs, because I think from a photography point of view, he shines a lot brighter than a lot of the other well-known channels around him. I think he is an extraordinary talent, I really do. And if I ever had the chance to meet him, I probably would be starstruck to some extent. So in the unlikely event that you are watching Adam, please do come over to the Isle of Man. Give us some insights on what it's like to run a YouTube channel. Good question. It's both simultaneously amazing and awful at the same time. Let me explain. So the process of creating inspiring and useful content for people can be absolutely brilliant. And for the most part, the community on YouTube is truly fantastic in my experience. But equally, there are lots of trolls out there, and getting overly fixated on the numbers of YouTube and losing sight of the real motivations for creating content can be massively destructive, particularly if you're the kind of individual that's low on self-confidence. And through my time on YouTube, that roller coaster journey, I've experienced the highs and lows of that, so I know how they feel. And I think it's only with experience now that I'm learning how to truly focus on the good aspects of it. But for anyone out there who is looking to start a channel, I would still recommend that you give it a go, but just prepare yourself for the highs and the lows. What's your favourite potato? Baked, jacket, roast or chip? It's all about chips for me, but I have to say roast potatoes comes a very close second. What is your dream country to photograph? I like that question. Kyrgyzstan in Central Asia. It's probably not an answer you were expecting, but funnily enough, I am actually booked to go there in July of this year, but increasingly I'm becoming resigned to the fact that it's probably not going to happen, sadly. But for me, the reason why this is a dream location is it's got landscapes to rival the Alps, Himalayas and Iceland, but it's a highly cheap and affordable destination that's well off the beaten track from many other tourists and photographers. So it's the kind of location that you can go and shoot incredible landscapes that have potentially never been shot before. Any tips for photographing the Milky Way, and what is the best time of year and best time of day to photograph in the UK? For me, astrophotography is just landscape photography at night. I don't distinctly see them as two separate niches. Yes, they've got different techniques to really excel in, but the same core principles of composition, foreground and balance within your photographs applies, I find. Really the key things for astrophotography are you need to be shooting at wide apertures to let in as much light as possible. You need to be shooting on a tripod at shutter speeds of between 15 and 30 seconds generally. You want to be shooting manual focus to infinity to get your stars nice and sharp. And generally speaking, you also want to be shooting at wider sort of focal lengths. Generally wider than 20 mils works best, I find. In terms of best time of year, I find on the Isle of Man, and this will apply equally to the whole of the UK, the best months for shooting the Milky Way are August and September, and there's a few reasons for this. Firstly, the nights start to get sufficiently dark after that mid period in summer where we never really have true night, but also the galactic center of the Milky Way becomes visible above the horizon, and it becomes visible at really accessible times early in the night. In terms of the best time to actually shoot the Milky Way, you need to wait until the night is sufficiently dark. So at dusk, this will happen after astronomical twilight. And what I'd recommend is an app called Photo Pills. I've covered this on a video before, but I'll just link at the top for that now. But basically that will give you the time of astronomical twilight and also tell you the visibility of the galactic center of the Milky Way at any time of year. So it's a really useful tool for getting the most out of your Milky Way shooting. What equipment do you use, and do you do photography full time? Well, I did a full rundown of my equipment in my last video. I'll just link to the top on that now, so I won't run through that again. And no, I do not do photography full time, and this actually leads quite nicely into the next question. What is your day job description, and how do you manage your time to fit in photography? Well, I work as a tutor for marketing qualifications, but the COVID-19 situation is causing a huge degree of disruption to that. So currently I do not have any tutoring to do, and it's likely to stay that way for a while. So this is causing a great deal of uncertainty for my future going forwards. So yeah, it's I've kind of got all the time in the world for photography at the moment, but just very little ability to do any. Next question. Who inspires you in the photography world? I feel to a question like this, I'm almost expected to reel off famous names, but I'm not going to. I actually draw a lot of inspiration from a fellow Isle of Man photographer called Colin Russell. I think his work is absolutely exceptional. He produces consistently high quality images of really off the beaten track locations on the Isle of Man, and he doesn't get anywhere close to the recognition he deserves, in my opinion. So I'm just going to pop a link to his website down in the description for you to check out. How much do you interact with other YouTube landscape photographers? Probably not as much as I should. I tend to find that most of the other channels are based in the mainland UK, so it makes interaction with them a bit more limiting for me because I'm stuck on the Isle of Man and it's quite expensive to get off this island. But I do watch a lot of their channels on a regular basis, and I thoroughly enjoy those. To be honest, I'm a bit of a shy creature, so I've never been particularly very good at the whole interaction thing. Why do you shoot Nikon, and would you consider using another brand? I love this question. My entire camera history goes something like this. I first used the Nikon D40X, then the Nikon D90, then the Nikon D7000, then the D600, then the D750, the D850, and then back to the D750. And basically I've stuck with Nikon because it's all I've ever known. But really, if I think about it, with that initial purchase back in 2007, the D40X, the only reason I bought that is it was the best deal I could find at the time. My knowledge was incredibly limited. So the point I'm trying to make here is that first purchase in 2007 could have easily been a Canon camera, and now this question would be asking why I use Canon. So basically the answer in a nutshell is brand loyalty. And would I consider using a different brand? Yes, I definitely would if the right opportunity presented itself. Next question. Do you feel foreign travel is vital to be a landscape photographer? Great question. No, I don't. Now, I'm a big advocate for travel, and I fully encourage people to embrace it because in many ways, it literally changed my life and opened my eyes. I know that sounds corny, but it honestly did. And I would fully encourage everyone to grab those opportunities because they are so, so valuable. But at the same time, there's a lot to be said for shooting locally. And I do actually think that it makes you a better photographer because you have to work harder to get those images. It's easy to be parachuted into the most beautiful places in the world and take great images. Frankly, in some of those locations, it's difficult to take bad images. So I think shooting locally genuinely actually makes you a better and more skilled photographer. And also, I think landscape photographers should care deeply about the environments which they're shooting to be effective. If you don't care about those environments, then why are you doing it? So I think to some extent there's a moral argument that landscape photographers who should care about the environment shouldn't really travel all the time to shoot those environments because there's a degree of hypocrisy there given the escalating climate crisis situation that we find ourselves in. And this is, I've been asking myself these questions in recent years, and I used to be a bit of a travel addict. I'd travel as much as I possibly could. And I have to say I've been trying to rein that back, going on less trips and trying to travel to places that are closer by instead of going to the opposite side of the world. So yeah, in answer to the question, no, I do not think that travel is a necessity. What is your favourite lens you have owned? The Nikon 18 to 35G wide-angle lens. That's the f3.5 to 4.5. It's super lightweight and super sharp. Do you ever feel uncomfortable vlogging with other people around? Absolutely, without fail, and I will actually go out of my way to avoid vlogging in front of people at all costs. Which one image represents you as a person? This is such a hard question, and I've spent a bit of time thinking about this, and I'm really struggling. I think there's a danger in any answer I give here could sound pretentious. But I'm going to say this image that I'm putting up on screen now that I took of the noctilucent clouds last year. Now, I'm not going to go into the psychology that underpins that choice. I'll leave that open to your interpretation. Otherwise, this could become some sort of public therapy session. Where do you focus to ensure sharpness throughout? I tend to use focus stacking quite regularly in my photography, and I think that's because I'm a big fan of wide-angle shots with really prominent foreground subjects that are close to the camera, and those are frankly almost impossible to shoot effectively without focus stacking. Focus stacking also gives me the creative freedom in post-processing to control the sharpness how I wish. However, for shots where I do not have those close and prominent foreground subjects, I'll usually either focus in for the main subject of the image when I'm not too bothered about the sharpness in the rest of the scene, or I'll focus approximately a third into the scene with a narrow aperture to give me sufficient depth of field through the entire shot. Next question. How do you fit photography around your marriage? You must have a very understanding wife, especially when it comes to travelling. Has it ever caused any friction? At home on the Isle of Man, it's surprisingly easy, but it's a different story entirely when travelling. I rarely go on photography focused trips. I'm always combining it with other holidays, so I've got to strike that balance between holiday and photography, and ultimately it's about compromise, really. But yes, there has been friction at times, but with experience I'm getting better at managing that. Put it this way, I've been to the Isle of Skye twice, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in the world, and I think I've taken a grand total of 4 images across those 2 trips. Next question. Have you considered having your work printed large scale and in a gallery exhibition? Yes, I would absolutely love to do this, but for me the main barrier is the upfront cost of printing and framing all of those pieces to put together a sufficient exhibition of scale. It's really quite prohibitive, and also I'm the kind of person that would be scared that no one would turn up. So maybe one day when I've got a bit more money and I'm less of a wimp, it will happen. Favourite photograph of yours and of another photographer? Well, I have to say I don't really have a personal favourite. I'm far too self-critical. I have to say I honestly don't think I've ever taken an image that I'm 100% satisfied with, and maybe I never will. And thinking about other photographers, no particular image comes to mind. I tend to judge photography work in terms of the overall portfolio rather than selectively thinking of photographers in terms of individual images. And then finally, to probably the most profound question of all. Can you please tell me what is your favourite flavour of jam? I've given this a lot of thought and I have to say raspberry for me. Raspberry, definitely. So that brings to a close today's Q&A video. Thank you very much for everyone who dropped their questions in. I hope I've given sufficient answers on those. If you've got any thoughts on the answers I did provide, pop them down below in the comments. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider hitting that little button below. So that's about it for today. Thanks very much for joining me, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.